This is an ABC News special report.
And good morning, everyone. I'm Kira Phillips. We are coming on the air with major developments in the Middle East. ABC News has now confirmed, after more than a year of fighting, a ceasefire deal in Gaza is now in place between Israel and Hamas. The agreement coming after breakthroughs in talks in Qatar. The agreement including the release of the dozens of hostages being held right now by Hamas. The Biden administration says there are 7 American hostages still in Gaza. At least 3 of them are believed to be alive. Officials say that Hamas has agreed to release 2 of them in the initial weeks of the ceasefire. In exchange, Israel will release hundreds of Palestinian prisoners. Israel will also pause fighting so desperately needed aid can finally get into Gaza. With just days left in office, this ceasefire deal was one of President Biden's top priorities. As you know, it has been in the works for months. The White House now working closely with President-elect Donald Trump's Mideast negotiator to broker this deal. Trump has been blunt, warning if these hostages are not back by the time he returns to office, that without hesitation, all hell would break out in the Middle East. Let's get straight to our foreign correspondent, Ian Pannell, with more. Ian, tell us what you know.
Yeah, Kira, that's right. We've been hearing from various different sources really over the last couple of days, and this momentum appears to have gathered. So we're now expecting a press conference to be held by the Qatari Prime Minister. Remember, the negotiations have been taking place in Qatar. Qatar has essentially hosted conversations, separate conversations have been taken together with the Israeli hostage negotiators and Hamas, but it's also involved the work of Egypt and the incoming Trump administration, as well as the Biden team. This is something the Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, has been working on for a long time. The details: this is a temporary ceasefire for now. Phase 1 would include the gradual release of hostages. We don't know the condition of those hostages. It's entirely possible that some of them will be dead and it will be bodies that will be returned to their loved ones. In all, we're expecting in this first 42-day period, so 6 weeks, we're expecting a developing, evolving process whereby Hamas releases 3 prisoners in the first tranche in exchange for Palestinian prisoners, which is controversial for some Israelis here who are adamantly against this deal. It's something that Netanyahu's managed to get through his security cabinet, despite objections from some of the more hard, far-right members of the security cabinet. In terms of the process, so you have the 6-week process. There'll be movement of troops pulling back from certain areas, and as those stages develop, so that will eventually, assuming there are no breaches of the ceasefire, lead to a full withdrawal. There have been a lot of different elements that have proved controversial in this, but the headline is brokered by the Biden administration, the incoming Trump team, Egypt, Qatar, and of course involving Israel and Hamas, is that there will be a ceasefire, which is clearly going to be great news for the population of Gaza. Remember, more than 46,000 people have been killed throughout this more than 15-month war. Obviously, hundreds of Israelis also killed on that October 7th attack, but also a number of Israeli soldiers also killed in the military operation that's been undergone in Gaza. It'll also include the flooding of Gaza with humanitarian aid. That's a key part of this negotiation, and then eventually that will lead to reconstruction. But it'll be great news for Israel, clearly amazing news for the Palestinians who've been stuck in Gaza in this living hell for so long now. We're still waiting for official announcements, though, to be clear. We need to hear that from the Qatari Prime Minister. We're expecting an announcement also to come from the Israelis. As you mentioned, President Trump has already posted on social media about this, but we will also probably hear something from the White House once these other announcements have been made. But after such a long, painful period, for so many people in this region, it's going to be broadly welcomed. As I mentioned, there is a section of Israeli society that's against it. They don't want to see Palestinian prisoners released. They say they're terrorists, that even if it means not returning the hostages, not returning the bodies of those who've been killed, that the war should continue. I think one thing that we should really bear in mind is there are 3 phases prescribed in this text that we have been given access to. Again, we need to see it in the flesh when it's actually published. But the sticking points, the real sticking points, is what comes next. Who runs Gaza? Now, Hamas, as the elected body, clearly feel that they should be the ones to run Gaza. That's a total non-starter for the Israelis. So in some senses, some of the really stickier points of this agreement have been kicked into the long grass, but they're going to have to be dealt with. While phase 1 is underway, negotiations have to start for phase 2 of the deal and then eventually for phase 3. So it's a complicated process. I would say it's very fragile. A lot of people are hoping that the guns will fall silent, but we have to wait and see how it pans out and whether these negotiations can continue.